On a clear June afternoon in 1971, two very different aircraft were preparing for flight in the western United States. At Los Angeles International Airport, a 5-person crew calmly boarded a McDonnell Douglas DC-9 belonging to Hughes Airwest. Flight 706 was scheduled to depart for Seattle, making several intermediate stops. Passengers boarded quietly while the pilots reviewed the instruments and the flight plan. Hundreds of miles away, at the Fallon Naval Air Station in Nevada, an F-4B Phantom II fighter jet from the Marine Corps was also preparing for takeoff. Mechanics had worked on its systems following a previous mission, and although not everything was fully operational, the aircraft was cleared to return to its base in El Toro, California. Its 2 crew members, a pilot and a radar intercept officer, tightened their harnesses for takeoff. June 6, 1971, Los Angeles International Airport, California, United States. It's 5:30 in the afternoon, and here, Hughes Airwest Flight 706 is boarding its 44 passengers who are about to depart for Utah. Hughes Airwest Flight 706 was a regular passenger transport flight that covered an extensive route across the western United States. Its itinerary began at Los Angeles International Airport and had Seattle, Washington as its final destination. However, the journey was not direct. The flight made multiple stops to connect various regional cities. After departing from Los Angeles, the aircraft was scheduled to land successively in Salt Lake City, Utah, Boise and Lewiston, Idaho, and Pasco and Yakima, Washington, before completing its route in Seattle. It was a routine flight within the short and medium-haul network that Hughes Airwest offered on the West Coast. The commercial aircraft involved was a McDonnell Douglas DC-931, registration N9345, operated by Hughes Airwest. A twin-engine jet designed for short and medium-range flights with a capacity of around 90 passengers. It was very popular on domestic routes in the U.S. during the 1970s due to its efficient and reliable design. It was in perfect working order and complied with maintenance standards. Hughes Airwest was a regional American airline purchased by Howard Hughes in 1970. Previously known as Air West, it operated short and medium-haul routes in the western part of the country. In 1971, the company was still undergoing integration under Hughes's management. Despite operating older fleets and serving highly congested areas like Southern California, the airline maintained a good reputation. At the controls of the DC-9 was Captain Theodore Nicolai, 50 years old, with 15,490 flight hours, 2,562 of them in DC-9 aircraft. Alongside him was First Officer Price Bruner, 49 years old, an experienced pilot with 17,128 flight hours, though only 272 in DC-9 aircraft. Completing the crew were 3 flight attendants, and with the 44 passengers, there were a total of 49 people on board the Hughes Airwest DC-9. At 6:02 p.m., the plane began accelerating down the runway. It lifted off without issue and began its climb toward the assigned cruising altitude of 33,000 feet. A few minutes before Flight 706's departure in Nevada, an F-4B Phantom II fighter jet had just undergone repairs following a radio system failure detected during its previous flight. The aircraft had been ordered to undergo repairs at the Fallon Naval Air Station in Nevada and then returned to Marine Corps Air Station El Toro. Diagnostic tests revealed that the aircraft had a non-functional radio due to a faulty transponder, a leaking oxygen system, and issues with its radar system. Maintenance personnel were able to fix the radio and confirm the oxygen leak, but the base lacked the personnel to repair either the transponder or the radar. By 5:15 p.m., the fighter jet was ready to depart for the El Toro Marine Corps Air Station. At the controls was First Lieutenant James R. Phillips, 27 years old. Also aboard was Radar Intercept Officer and First Lieutenant Christopher E. Schiess, 24 years old. Together, they had logged over 1,000 flight hours. A minute later, the roar of the fighter jet confirmed its departure from Fallon. Back to Flight 706. Shortly after takeoff, at 6:06 p.m., the DC-9 established contact with the Los Angeles ARTCC Control Center. The flight was climbing without issue in optimal weather conditions. At 6:09 p.m., the crew reported passing through 12,000 feet, and the controller instructed them to turn to heading 040, then proceed directly to Daggett. The first officer acknowledged the instruction. Meanwhile, several hundred miles away, the F-4B Phantom II chose to fly low, using visual flight rules due to its radar and transponder issues. This was intended to keep the aircraft clear of controlled airspace and commercial flight paths. But as it approached the San Gabriel Mountains, which rise over 10,000 feet, the Phantom was forced to climb rapidly to 15,500 feet to clear the terrain. It was at that moment that its path dangerously aligned with that of Flight 706, which was climbing under air traffic control toward its cruising altitude. Both aircraft were flying at perpendicular angles. The combined closing speed was 683 miles per hour. The Phantom, painted in bluish-gray, was nearly invisible against the sky. Additionally, on board the DC-9, the military jet was obscured behind a structural pillar in the cockpit, rendering it invisible to the crew for more than 20 seconds. Meanwhile, the radar intercept officer in the Phantom had his head down, reviewing the degraded mapping radar. Eight seconds before impact, the officer looked up and spotted the DC-9. He shouted to the pilot, who saw it at that moment as well. They attempted an evasive maneuver, banking left and descending. But it was too late. The Phantom's vertical fin and right wing slammed into the underside of the DC-9's nose, shearing off the cockpit and severely damaging the fighter jet. The radar officer managed to eject and survived. The pilot died upon impact with the mountainside. The DC-9, now uncontrolled, entered a descending spiral. Several witnesses saw the commercial aircraft falling like a leaf in the wind. The fuselage spun as papers and debris scattered while it dropped from 15,000 feet. Within seconds, the main body of the plane crashed into a deep gorge in the San Gabriel Mountains, almost completely disintegrating. The detached cockpit fell into a ravine over a kilometer away. The explosion was so loud that in the city of Duarte, over 4 kilometers away, it felt like an earthquake. Rescue efforts began immediately, but the terrain was extremely difficult. 45% slopes, no roads or access, dense vegetation, and the presence of rattlesnakes. Emergency teams took hours to reach the site. There, they found a nightmarish scene. 9 bodies were still strapped in their seats. The rest were dismembered. There were no survivors on the DC-9. The only one who lived to tell the story was the Phantom's radar officer. What had happened? The investigation of the accident was conducted by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, and revealed a systemic problem. Both crews acted within legal limits. Flight 706 was under radar control and on its assigned airway. The Phantom, although damaged, was operating under VFR with no obligation to contact civilian controllers. Technical problems and operational errors. The F-4B had a long list of issues. The transponder was inoperative, making it invisible to controllers' secondary radar. The aircraft's own radar was functioning in a degraded mode, making it difficult to detect other air traffic. The oxygen system had a leak, forcing the jet to fly at low altitude for most of the journey, except when crossing the mountains. The radio had been partially repaired, but was not used to contact civilian controllers. Despite these conditions, the military squadron authorized the jet's return to El Toro. The RIO confirmed that for most of the flight, the radar detected no air traffic, and no attempt was made to contact ARTCC. They did not request radar advisories, not even when entering the air corridor over the San Gabriel Mountains. Air traffic control limitations. The radar system at Palmdale, which managed that airspace, was an ARSR-1E using World War II-era technology. Although controllers had limited visibility of traffic, especially if aircraft lacked a transponder, weather conditions did not prevent detection. However, the Phantom did not appear on the screen. Its radar signature was weak and sporadic, and its speed made tracking difficult. Despite up to 4 people monitoring the radar, no one saw it. Controllers did not issue any traffic alerts to Flight 706 because they simply didn't know the Phantom was there. The primary radar showed no target before the impact. Probable causes and conclusions. The NTSB concluded that the probable cause was the inability of both flight crews to see and avoid each other, a direct consequence of systemic limitations. It was acknowledged that the pilots had virtually no chance of detecting the other aircraft. The DC-9's field of vision was obstructed, and the F-4B was painted for camouflage. Most critically, there was no mandatory protocol requiring military aircraft to report their route or coordinate with civilian traffic, even when flying in shared airspace. This disconnect between civilian and military aviation was deemed unsustainable. The accident forced a radical shift in the relationship between military and civilian aviation. Since then, U.S. military aircraft are required to file flight plans even when flying under VFR, maintain contact with civilian air traffic control in congested areas, avoid known civilian airways, fly with operational transponders. Additionally, the Palmdale Radar Center, which used World War II-era technology, underwent modernization, and discussions began regarding the implementation of collision alert systems. The crash of Flight 706 was a turning point. After it, the FAA and the Department of Defense began closer cooperation. While the implementation of mandatory transponders and TCAS wasn't completed until after other accidents, PSA 182 in 1978 and Aeromexico 498 in 1986, the 706 case was the starting point for that path. If this case has impacted you and you want to delve deeper into what happened, I recommend checking out the following sources. They include official reports, specialized articles, documentaries, and podcasts that thoroughly examine all aspects of this accident. NTSB Report AAR 7226. This official report provides a detailed analysis of the accident, including technical data, testimonies, and investigative conclusions. Mid-air catastrophe. the story of Hughes Airwest Flight 706, a narrative and technical analysis that contextualizes the accident and its implications for aviation safety. Mayday, Air Disasters, Episode Speed Trap. This episode of the Canadian series recreates the events of Flight 706, combining dramatizations with expert interviews. Air Crash Investigation Special Report. Collision Course. A special that examines multiple mid-air collisions, including Flight 706, and explores common contributing factors. Hard Landings Podcast. Episode on Flight 706. A podcast offering a detailed narration of the accident, exploring both technical and human aspects of the event. Today we traveled back to June 6, 1971, when a Hughes Airwest DC-9 took off from Los Angeles on a routine flight northbound. On board were 49 people, passengers with their own destinations, plans, and stories. But hundreds of miles away, a military jet also took off, heading home. And the vast, shared sky placed them on the same path without anyone knowing it. In a matter of seconds, two flight paths crossed in the air, and a collision brought about a tragedy that could have been avoided. What happened that day wasn't due to a single mistake, but to a system that allowed civilian and military aviation to operate without communicating, without seeing each other, and without protecting one another. Thank you for making it this far, friends. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave your likes and comments. They're very important for the channel. See you next week, friends.